Hello everyone, welcome back to Croc Creek Brewery. Thank you for joining me today. Today we have a brand new mead we're going to be making. It is called a Hydromel. Now what is a Hydromel? A Hydromel is literally, at the linguistics level, a water mead. So it is a mead that is made with half of the usual honey load we generally use in a mead. If you've watched any of my previous videos, in particularly my video on making the Green Dragon, which is my rosemary black pepper mead, I used 3 pounds of honey. However, in this Hydromel, we're only going to be using 1.5 pounds. That means we're going to have half of the usual specific gravity and half of the ABV of a traditional mead. So while my traditional Green Dragon generally has about 12% to 14% alcohol, we're going to have 6 to 7% alcohol in this Hydromel. We're going to be making a Rosemary Hydromel. This is based off of a recipe from City Steading Brews, which is another homebrew channel here on YouTube, and they produce some wonderful homemade wines and meads and beers and ciders on their channel. I highly suggest you go check out their channel. I love all their videos. I watch them as they come out weekly. It's a great channel with Brian and Derica. So if you watch their videos, please tell them that I sent you their way. So what we have today is we have 4 sprigs of rosemary. This is rosemary I collected from my own garden. These are 4-inch sprigs of rosemary. That produces about 0.1 to 0.2 grams of rosemary if you want to be specific with the weight. We're going to go ahead and add those into our 1-gallon carboy. Everything has been sanitized in Star San. We're also going to go ahead and add 25 raisins. Now, these add a little bit more today than they would usually add in my traditional brews. This brew is going to be a wild ferment. This is going to be one of the first wild ferments I've ever done, which means that a wild ferment is a brew that does not add any commercial yeast. We're going to be using the yeast that is exclusive to the honey, to the yeast, and to the raisins. These are going to be the only wild yeasts added to this brew. I'm not going to be using Lalvin K1116, K1V 1116. I'm not going to be adding any yeast whatsoever, bread yeast, nothing, to this brew. This brew is going to be made in a more traditional fashion. The yeast that are present in the ingredients added are going to ferment this brew. So the raisins are almost essential to this recipe. We're going to go ahead and add 25 of them. We're going to pinch them along the way. There's 13, 16, 19, 25 raisins. I also have my honey over here. It's been warming up on the stove for the last few minutes. That makes it a little bit easier to pour. Here is our funnel. Let's go ahead and add our honey. This is non-pasteurized honey. Make sure whatever honey you buy is as natural as it can be. If you buy honey that has been pasteurized, it will not ferment. The yeasts have been boiled at that point and they are dead. it will not ferment no matter how long of time you give it. And this brew, being a wild ferment, needs that wild yeast. So if you can buy local honey from your local farmer's market, by all means do that. I typically do buy honey locally from my local hardware store, and that honey is produced in my hometown. This is North American honey. I bought this from my local HEB. This was actually on sale today, so that's why I bought that. And it is non-pasteurized, 100% pure local honey. So that's what we're going to be using today. Let me go ahead and fill this up with water. We're going to shake this up to get all of the sugars, all the honey we can out of this jar. I'll be right back. So I have this jar about half full of water. We're going to go ahead and shake this up and get all of the residual honey out of this container. Don't forget to continually use your funnel, because that funnel also has residual honey on it. I'll be right back. So when you're making meads, whether it's a hydromel, a traditional mead, a capsicumel, any mead, keep using the jar the honey came in, rinsing it out, shaking it up, continuously use the funnel until you are confident you got all of the honey out. So we're about a third full of our honey and water with our rosemary. And as you can see in the funnel, there's a little bit of honey. So what we're gonna do is fill this up at my faucet. This is my regular tap water that I use. My tap water tastes great. If your tap water does not taste good, don't use it in your brews. Use something like 1 gallon bottled water. Use reverse osmosis water. Any water that tastes good is good to brew with. So I'm gonna go ahead and rinse this off in my tap water and fill this about half full with water. I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. So as you can see, we're filled up a little over half with water. It's right to the bottom of the 1 gallon marker on my carboy. We're gonna go ahead and stir this up. Now, when I make meads, I generally stir it with my stir stick attached to my rotary drill. The reason for that is honey is a lot thicker than granulated sugar. When I make homemade wines, I'll stir it up by hand. It's no problem whatsoever. But when I stir up a mead, it takes me about 3 to 4 times longer. So when I'm doing a video and making a mead, I generally use my drill and stir stick. However, off camera, I stir my meads no problem by hand. Let me get my drill. This saves me a lot of time when it comes to making videos. So we're gonna let that sit for a minute, make sure all of our honey is dissolved. If you see a distinctive layer between your honey and your water, keep stirring it. Keep stirring it until it is homogeneous. You don't want there to be any distinctive markers between your honey and your water. I bought this stir stick here on Amazon. It cost me about $3. This has been a lifesaver when it comes to making brews when I want to save a whole lot of time. It could take me 5 to 10 minutes to shake this up to where it's all homogeneous. But if I'm using my stir stick on my rotary drill, it takes me less than 5 minutes. It's a huge time saver. Now, like I said, this is one of the few wild ferments I've ever done. I have never been daring enough to really make a wild ferment here in South Texas. There are a ton of bacteria here in the air, mold spores, anything you can imagine. I've always added commercial yeast to my brews, so I played on the safe side, so everything is totally burned through, and I don't ever risk oxidation or mold spores getting into my brew. However, with this brew, we're going to be risking it. Not only is this a wild ferment, but this contains half of our sugar content that we typically use with a mead. So that means it's only going to be half of the ABV, about 6 to 7% alcohol by volume, which means it has a higher chance of gaining mold spores, of acetobacters getting into our brew and turning it to vinegar. And so everything I've used, and I mean everything I've used with this brew, has been sanitized, sanitized again, and sanitized a third time just to make sure everything's clean. I don't want there to be anything getting into this brew, because if it does, this brew is the most likely chance I've ever made of it turning to vinegar or molding. And usually at this point in our brew making, we would go ahead and add yeast to it. But since this is a wild ferment, the only yeast that's going to be in this brew is what's present in the honey, the rosemary, and the raisins. So we're going to go ahead and top this off with water up to just below the handle of our carboy. We're going to fill that up with water, and so we'll see you in just a second. Okay, so we're back. And as you can see, it is filled right up below the bottom of the handle of our carboy. We're going to go ahead and stir this up one more time. That way we get a homogeneous mixture of honey and water. And there we go. So that is mixed thoroughly. What we're going to do now is pretty simple. We're going to go ahead and put our airlock and stopper on this, and we're going to add a label to it. But before we do that, we need to go ahead and check with our hydrometer what our alcohol by volume could potentially be. Let me get my hydrometer. And I forgot my turkey baster. I'll be right back. You can't forget the trusty turkey baster. And there we go. I'm going to let this sit on the rim of the carboy and let it drain. That way any honey, any sugars drain out of it. And let's see what our ABV is. I have made a hydromel before. It was not a wild ferment, but I remember I had about 1.050 specific gravity. I think we'll be close to that today. We are at 1.060 for our original gravity. That'll give us about a 7% alcohol brew. I'm totally satisfied with that. I think any of the wild yeasts that are present in the honey, the rosemary or the raisins, will have no problem burning through that. But to be honest, I'm not sure if it'll go all the way dry or not. This is totally an experiment for me. And if you ever do a wild ferment, it's totally an experiment. You have no idea if it'll burn down to 2.5% alcohol or 4%, 10%. You have no idea what yeasts are present in your area. So let me go ahead and add this back to my sanitization liquid and I'll be right back. Let's go ahead and throw in our turkey baster into our sanitization liquid and add in the rest of our honey water solution. There we go. Okay, so we have here our airlock filled halfway full with sanitization liquid. We're going to go ahead and put this in. It kind of seems weird. It kind of seems weird to me to not add any yeast to this brew. I've been making brews for almost 2 years now. And this really interrupts my process of how to make homemade wines and meads. I have a process going in my mind and in the practice of my hands to do it a certain way. And so to not add yeast to it seems wrong. But I assure you, this is how our ancestors did it in years past. This is how the Vikings who made mead for years, who are the most famous mead makers in history, this is how they did it. And so we have no worries that this will ferment. I have no problem with letting this go for about 2 weeks. If I don't see any signs of fermentation in 2 weeks, I'm going to check it again. And then if it's stuck, I may add commercial yeast to it. But you'll see me check this in a future video. You'll see me check this with my hydrometer to see how it's doing here in about 2 to 3 weeks. We'll make sure that we have negative pressure, make sure we're bubbling in the next few days, and we'll go from there. So thank y'all for joining me today. I hope y'all have enjoyed this wild ferment, this wild hydromel. We'll see you on the next one. Bye now.